And I was sitting on there with a 357. And I was like, if he comes up this driveway, I don't care. I'll protect my boys.
Yeah.
And my heart instantly felt like it got ripped out of my chest. That restraining order is still in effect. There's some civil talking, and it's only regarding the boys. I was laying there on this hard mat, shivering, just so cold, but then I was sweating profusely because I was so nervous. I got preeclampsia. I had to have a C-section. I was in labor for 28 hours, but he ended up, and I forgot that he choked me. And in the police report, I said, he had his hands around me, and I told him I can't breathe.
What's going on, that Supernatural Talk podcast family? Now, today I'm wearing dark blue because I'm feeling so icy. You know why? You know why I'm so icy? Dark blue icy today. Because y'all's host on today's podcast is no other than dark blue Keegs Ice, white rice, forever nice himself. And he is going to be doing amazing on this podcast today, okay? Today is episode 23 of that Supernatural Talk podcast. Now, if it's your first time watching, I need you to subscribe, hit the notification bell so you can be notified of every podcast episode we put out here at that Supernatural Talk podcast. Smash the like button. Let's get this thing in the algorithm, and share so your family and friends can hear these amazing testimonies. But this is an icy testimony coming up right now. I'm just saying that. I haven't even heard the testimony myself yet, but it's coming up because we got an icy man on here, Keegs Ice himself. And yeah, it's going to be good. So episode 23 of that Supernatural Talk podcast is going to be wonderful. Love having you all here. Also, I want to invite you to become a forerunner, a person who that is actually involved in discipleship within the ministry. Go to www.thesupernaturallife.org and click the link that says become a forerunner. Okay. With that being, and if you want to become a member on the podcast channel and see these wild behind the scenes, do that also. All right, we're about to get to this wonderful episode with Keegs So Icy White Rice Forever Nice podcast hosting today. He's a wonderful podcast host, Annie. I'll be back soon, though. I will. Actually, I'm going to be doing my wife's testimony here in the very near future, her own personal testimony. Y'all have heard our testimony together, but hers is an amazing one also. So can't wait to give you all that. So there's a little preview of what's to come. But anyway, Keegs Ice, come on in, man. Big things are about to happen on this episode, and we are going to be having our very own Shayla Hager. Y'all just heard her husband's testimony. Get ready to hear this one. This one's wild too. So I'm ready to hear Jesus be glorified. I hope you are too. In Jesus' name.
Oh, what's going on, that Supernatural Talk family? So sorry, I'm just sipping on some tea here because we have an amazing guest who's going to spill all the Holy Ghost tea today. And that is Shayla Hager. Welcome, woman of God. I'm so glad you're here. So glad you're here. Guys, this is episode 23 of that Supernatural Talk podcast. I'm your host, Keegs Ice. And you heard John's testimony last week for episode 22. Comment if you watched it. If you haven't watched that yet, make sure y'all go watch that episode. And we have his bride, the lovely Shayla, here today. And boy, does she have an amazing testimony. But before we dive into this, again, I know Apostle already told y'all, make sure you like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell because we put out fire supernatural podcasts every single week. And of course, make sure you become a member of the podcast family so that way you can get access to exclusive behind the scenes episodes every week. And if you're listening on our other podcast platforms such as Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure you go to our hosted website provider, Buzzsprout, and become a member on there to help us continue to push this podcast out so that way people from all over the world can experience Jesus. But let's dive right into this. Shayla, mighty woman of God, how are you? Are you excited to be here today? I'm so excited to have you today.
I'm so excited and blessed. Thank you.
Yeah, it's going to be such an amazing podcast, and I just can't wait. I've never personally heard your full testimony before. I think this is one of your first times actually publicly sharing your testimony of a lot of the things that's happened in your life.
Absolutely.
Specifically, like these last 5 years has been a crazy journey for you.
Yes, sir.
Just, experiencing the supernatural life and everything. But let's just get right into it.
Okay.
Let's start. I know you encountered Jesus really young. So let's maybe talk more about your childhood and just your upbringing and all that good stuff.
Okay. So I mean, I was raised in church. Both of my grandmas, it's amazing. They both got saved in their 30s. My grandma on my mom's side was 33. And so I was truly raised in church. But when I was 4, I told my grandma on my mom's side, my grandma Laverne, I said, and I asked Jesus into my heart. So she took me into we called it her den. It was her back room. And I remember asking him into my heart. And it's funny. I don't think I truly realized what it meant to serve the Lord, but I knew Jesus and I understood how cool he was and all this stuff when I was little. And actually, in fact, I was going through our shed the other day and I found a picture of when I was in first grade. And it was a journal I had. And it said, Jesus is so cool. I love him so much. I can't remember what all it said, but I was like, he truly always just has been there,
Yeah.
And in first grade, I mean, all the way through, really up until I graduated high school. And still, I was like, I'm going to be a pastor's wife. I'm going to sing and play the piano. And that'll be my job.
Wow.
I just wanted to be the pastor's wife, and,
Yeah.
but I've always wanted to do ministry. That's been my heart since I've been little, is full-time ministry, whatever that entailed. So I got my first drum set at 6. And I wanted to be on a worship team, so I just started goofing off. But in middle school, in 6th grade, I started playing on the worship team and played on a worship. I mean, I still play for Miami.
Sure do.
Yeah. So there was a short time in there, about 4 years, that I didn't, and we'll talk on a lot about that.
Yeah.
But my heart is worship, but just leading people to the Lord and helping the broken. And that's what I wanted. I always said I was going to help women, bruised and battered women. And, it's become so much more than that. But all through elementary, I served the Lord. 8th grade, I'd say I was a little bit naughty in 8th grade. I think we all go, you don't know your identity when you're going in middle school. You just want to fit in. And I remember I was in youth. I was going to camp and all this stuff. And I was a little bit naughty. I'd cuss and, say things I shouldn't and kiss boys. I like to kiss boys. I was naughty. I did. I was like, I got my first kiss in first grade, which is terrible.
Oh,
don't do that when you're little. But I went through middle school and I was on the worship team then. If you call it dating, I dated this guy my freshman year and we broke up. And freshman year, people knew I was a Christian, but I didn't stand out as much. And between my freshman and sophomore year, I went to church camp, and I truly it was more just sacrificing all the stuff, right? I was like, it is time that I truly step in and I serve the Lord with all I have. It's not going to be the lukewarm thing.
Yeah.
And I really did decide, like, from that point. And I remember going back to school my sophomore year, and the same guy was like, what happened to you? And I'm like, I truly started serving the Lord, because I would invite him to youth, but still outside I was, and I love the Lord, but it was more the 1 foot in, 1 foot out thing. And all through high school, like, my heart was my youth pastors. They had started dating when she was 13 and he was 17. And I was like, I just want to meet my husband and marry him. Like, that's all. I just wanted to get married and have kids and be the pastor's wife and do ministry. I mean, that's what I wanted. And went through high school, and I graduated early. I graduated at semester and helped my aunt actually open the beauty school that I attended.
Wow.
And I always loved hair, but I loved people. I wanted to be around people. And I knew that she was almost, a hairdresser's like a counselor. They, everything about everyone. And so I helped her open that. I graduated semester, helped her that whole semester, and then graduated and spent a year in beauty school. I was actually engaged to a guy. We dated 6 months, and he was so kind, but that was a big no. I was like,
wow.
And my mom kept, he's not the one for you. I'm like, I know, but if he's not, God will tell me. And I kept telling her, if he's not, God will tell me. Well, I couldn't have had more ways that God told me he's not, who he had for me. And I broke it off. And after that, I met my now ex-husband.
Wow.
So about, let's see, I graduated beauty school in 2006. So I met him June of 2007.
Wow. So just to back it up a little bit, were you, like, did you grow up like in a whole home, like where both your mom and dad were present, like you went to church? Obviously, I know you said your grandmas were very important. Like, did they believe in like the supernatural? Like, were like they spirit filled? Like, did you ever like have that, or was it more religious focused? Like, what was that like growing up?
It's interesting because the church that we went to certainly believed in that. My mom and dad were both from the picture. My dad had always worked nights, so he didn't go to church often, and he never really pushed it. My mom was, we're going to church every Sunday, you're wearing a dress. It was religious kind of on that aspect, which I'm grateful, that she pushed me to go to church for sure. There was a lot of fighting in our house, a lot, and now looking at that and realizing, that we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, I realized truly it was that. I mean, I have an older sister, and that's still not a situation. There's no relationship there. And I know the Lord can restore that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there was that, and there was turmoil and continuous. And really, I grew up a lot closer to my grandma.
Yeah. And I know we're going to dive deeper into your family later, because I know there's a lot of stuff that has happened with that, and that's been a big part of your testimony too.
Absolutely.
But from the outside looking in, it seems like your childhood was pretty much picture perfect. You were the golden child, you told me you never even got in trouble, right? You never really did anything wrong. No. And so you were kind of that, like, I love Jesus, poster child. Yeah. And so really it seems like there's not much that could go wrong, but later in life we start to see what happens. And it's so funny because it seems, you said this, you were like, I just wanted to be a pastor's wife. I wanted to do that. And it's so funny because, the devil knew that as well. Sir. And that's what he attacks the most, and your identity and your marriage. So I know your marriage is a huge, huge part. I'm really interested though in the engagement. I don't know if you can maybe go a little bit in that with this guy, but like maybe if you can talk a little bit more on that engagement and then go into how your marriage starts, that'd be great.
Okay. So he was the sweetest guy, not like my honey over there, but he was a very sweet guy.
We don't want John to beat anybody up.
Yeah, I don't want John beating anybody up.
We don't want to follow him.
So one of my best friends, I have known her since third grade, and it was actually her husband's brother. Mm. They were getting ready to get married. That's when I actually met him. I walked with him down the aisle at their wedding. And I was like, man, he's handsome. And she's like, well, he's dating this. And she's like, Shayla, and I was like, but he's so sweet. And really my big thing is kindness has always been so huge to me. Yeah. I love manly men, but who are kind. Mm-hmm. And he was just super sweet. Well, he broke up with the girl, and then we started dating, and we got engaged after 2 months. No, I'm sorry, 6 months. We got engaged after 6 months. And my friend still was like, Shay, and it's her brother-in-law, but she's like, Shay, and I'm like, yeah, well, he went through 6 jobs in 6 months.
Oh my goodness.
He didn't have a driver's license. He started going to church for me, and I mean, I was like, I want someone who loves Jesus. Like, that's all there is to it. So he didn't have a driver's license. He went through all those jobs. I would drop him off at a job, and then he'd come back, well, I quit. I'm like, huh? And I had graduated beauty school. I was getting ready to graduate. I'm sorry. But I was also helping my aunt in her salon, like as an assistant, because kind of learning the ropes. And I had a truck. I was working, like I said, he was so kind. But I finally was like, to me, a man, I know what a man's job is, to provide. Yeah. And I was like, if I have to be the one, be the breadwinner, be the one, the chauffeur, I was like, this isn't going to work. And he was kind. I hope nothing but the best for him. But I was like, yeah, this is not going to happen. So that's where that one. So I broke up with him. That was it would have been June of 2006. It was right after I graduated. June of 2007, sorry. And I was working. I broke up with him. And I was like, I'm done with guys. And that same friend was like, Shay, I'm really good friends with this girl. And her brother was like on meth for years, but he got saved and he loves Jesus and he's called to ministry. And I'm like, are you? And I was like, no, I'm done. Done with guys. I'm good. And a lady I worked with was like, Shayla, there's this guy that it's cool. He was addicted to meth and he got like saved. He loves Jesus. He wants to do ministry. And I'm like, what's his name? And she told me, I'm like, that's the same dude. So I had 2 different people that don't even talk. I mean, I think they knew each other because it's a small town. Yeah. But I was like, well, that's it. There must be a reason why these 2 people are telling me. So I'm like, I'll meet him, but that's it. I'm not dating him. I'll meet him. So this was my now ex. And so I met him, and he'd gotten saved, and his grandparents they actually helped plant churches. So it's in his blood, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
he was raised in church, but he truly got saved. I thought at that point. And so we started dating. We actually got engaged after 2 months, and
Oh, wow.
I felt like there was no problem with that whatsoever. You know, I was like, he loves the Lord. We're going to do ministry. This is it. And I truly kept praying, and I was like, Lord, if this isn't it, show me.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. Even about a week before, it was a couple days before our wedding, we had the church, and we were decorating, and there were even a couple red flags then, and like anger. And I was like, well, I've made it this far. I'm engaged. There's 600 people coming to my wedding. I can't call this off. I'm like, that's,
Wow.
but the anger, the quick temper and rage. And I was like, no, he loves the Lord. You know, it'll be good.
So these were things that you were seeing for the first time. And really, to think about it, you really didn't know each other before your wedding, because you guys had only been, it's been like a few months,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
We got engaged after 2, married after 6.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
you know, it was, you didn't really know each other, but it was, again, that justification of, you're like, well, like, but he loves the Lord, you know? And it was that, again, that desire in your heart, like, well, we can do ministry together.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's important to understand, because sometimes I believe there's a verse in the Bible that says that the heart can deceive us.
100%.
You know, and so I think that was something that you experienced in that moment. But, you know, we know that God works out all things for his good, and God doesn't want divorce. And I remember, even, this is helpful for you guys watching, Apostle said this the other day, and it like wrecked me. He said, sometimes it's not who God has ordained for you. He said, but even when people step out in their own will and they choose to marry someone, he says God will still come in and will still ordain that marriage, and will still work through that marriage, and he will, like I said, work all things out for his good. And so this is important for you guys to know, like, God does not want divorce, right? And even if you feel like you married out of season, out of God's will, he still can make things happen. But I just wanted to share that. Let's just get into that. So you're seeing red flags, but you're justifying it.
Yeah.
Leading up to the wedding.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was it. I mean, I just saw a couple of things, like I said, with the anger and just a quick temper and getting mad. And I was like, no, it's good. You know, God's in this. We're getting married the right way. So at that point, I was living at my grandma's. And I'll just backtrack because of that, because I really think that I'm grateful that my parents raised me in church, but my grandma Laverne was truly just that, kind of that pillar. My grandpa had passed. I lived with her 2 years when I was going to beauty school and before I got married. So, you know, I'd talk to her, and, well, baby, you know, it's, you know, she was just she was mine, you know. And, you know, we'd pray together, and you know, but she was kind of that one that's like, well, you know, if that's who the Lord has for you, but she was never like pushing. So it was interesting. There was even almost that red flag where, like, my grandma wasn't like, this is it, you know. But so we got married, and we had Asher. We got married January of 2008, and Asher was born April of 2009. And you know, that name Asher, I had that name picked out way before we even got engaged. And I knew when I had a son, I would name him Asher, because it means blessed and happy. And I knew that my kids would have a calling on their life. Like, I had no doubt. So anyway, we got married, had Asher. He almost died. I got preeclampsia. I had to have a C-section. I was in labor for 28 hours.
Wow.
Had to have an emergency C-section, and he came out and was blue. And I remember I had that sheet up, and I looked back. David was right here, and I looked back, and I was like, God, you did not bring my son this far to let him die. And I'm like, he will live in the name of Jesus. And I was watching, and then he got, you know, they were doing that suction thing, and he didn't make a peep. It's funny, he's still so quiet, but he didn't cry. He just, his color came back, and I was like, okay. And, you know, we raised him the way we should. I had him in church. And even when I was pregnant with him, he was in my belly. I mean, on the drums. I could feel him when I'd play worship music, and on the drums, he'd be kicking. I was like, he's praising in my stomach, you know?
Wow.
Yeah, I
That's
knew.
so beautiful.
And with both my boys, I mean, when I was pregnant with them, I could feel them in my belly. Anytime I'd be on the drums or singing or playing guitar, they would move. You know, I'm like, yeah. But so with David, we were married a couple of years, and I think I got on the computer one day, and you know, it's funny, smartphones weren't really a thing, right? I mean, I think iPhones came out like in 2010. I don't remember, but they weren't easily accessible. So I got on my computer and I saw corn, and my heart instantly felt like it got ripped out of my chest. You know, and you see the effects on.
And just for everyone watching, just in case you don't know, we cannot say the actual P word, so that's why you'll reference us saying corn throughout the podcast, just so you guys know. Definitely.
So I was a lot heavier. So in my mind, I thought, okay, well, and it was a fight, you know, I mean, my heart was broken, and he promised I'll never look at it again. I'm like, okay. And like I said, Asher was little, and I was like, all right, you know, and we were going to church, and I kept, you know, when are you going to start doing ministry? When are you going to start, you know, and there was still a lot of anger, and there was never a true surrender.
Yeah.
And I would remind him, I had a letter that he had written me, and it said, my heart is to see the slave to addiction set free. And if I ever forget that, remind me. So I'd tell him, and then there'd be a fight. And I'd be like, what about your call? You know, and it was a continuous fight, but I prayed day and night for that man. And I lost 50 pounds. It took me a year. I lost 50 pounds. I weigh less now than I did in middle school. And I thought, you know, if I could lose that weight, he'll never look at that again. And rejection, of course. And fear. I think fear of abandonment, because I'm like, well, he's leaving me for something. You know, it's just a lot of stuff. But so we went through that, and it was rough. My heart aches for people who they want to fill that void in them that truly only the Lord can fill, you know, whether that's addiction to corn, tobacco, alcohol, whatever that is, it's, you know, it's always that place that the Lord is the only one who can fill. And I knew that with him. I knew there was brokenness. I knew there was stuff. And, you know, I wanted freedom for that, but I didn't know anything about deliverance. I didn't know anything. I knew I was called to more, right? I had dreams of demons chasing me from the time I was little.
Wow.
I couldn't get Jesus out. I would say, and all I knew was say, I rebuke you. So I'd be like, I rebuke you, and I couldn't get it out. I had demons standing in my room when I was little. I mean, I'd see the hat man or whatever. I mean, I would see him, and I'd be like, Mom. I've seen demons my whole life, and I knew there was spiritual warfare, but I didn't understand the extent and truly how the Lord can just set someone free in an instant. And, you know, I wanted that for him, but I wanted that for our marriage. I wanted our marriage to truly be, because marriage is so sacred to me, and it's so special, and that's what I wanted. So we went through that, and we actually ended up moving in with my grandma for a short time, taking care of her, not too long before she passed. And I ended up getting pregnant again, and I lost the baby. I think I wasn't far along. I was like 9 weeks. I went in for a checkup, and they're like, there's no heartbeat. So she sent me for an ultrasound, and I could see the baby floating. And, you know, it's interesting. I was sad, but I trusted the Lord in that. I was like, Lord, I know that if there's a reason, you know, it's okay. I'll see my baby, you know, and I was sad, but it changed something in him, caused way more anger, caused more bitterness and rage. And he started drinking a lot. And I was once in a while, I'd have a drink, because I was raised like, you do not drink. And once in a while I would have a little bit, and he's like, well, just have like a sip of whiskey. It'll help you kind of relax when we're taking care of grandma. And I was like, okay, you know, and I kind of started doing that. And so then along came Brody Shay, my little one. Asher and Brody are 5 years apart. And at that point, before Brody was born, he started, David had gotten really hooked on painkillers. He was working at a coal mine, and really what would happen there is they would all, like, someone would run out, and then they'd be like, well, I have 10 left. I'll sell you 5 for $200. So I would look in my checking account, and I'm like, why is there $300 missing? And he's like, well, I ran out of pain pills. I needed to buy some. And it's like, and I knew there wasn't that much pain, you know, and he had
Yeah.
gotten prescription, but it was, 60 pills within a week, gone.
Wow.
And I'm like, what in the heck? Well, I had Brody. I had a C-section. It was a planned one. And I was in pain. I had to get blood. It wasn't a good thing. I was in there, and it was the next day after he was born. And I was like, yeah. And I was hurting. And, they're like, push the button when, if you need a pain pill. So he's like, you need to get a pain pill. And I'm like, I know I'm hurting. He's like, no, I need a pain pill. And he was starting to be really cranky. So I called the nurse and I said, yeah. She's like, you need a pill. I said, yeah, I'm starting to hurt. And so she gave it to me. They stand there and make sure you swallow it. I put it under my tongue and I held it under there. And when she walked out, I gave him the pain pill because there was such and the personality changed because the addiction, right? It was mean. And then he finally settled down. But let me backtrack before that. Sorry. In between Asher and Brody, we had Asher. He was little. He was 2.5. Mm-hmm. October of 2011. I thought the corn thing was done, and he was on night shifts. I had left Asher with my grandma. I had to go get an ultrasound at the hospital, and I forgot my paperwork for it. So I opened the door really quick, went in the house, and I saw him kind of duck behind the counter, and I was like, and I walked around, and his phone was hanging out of his pocket, and I grabbed it, corn, and I was like, I'm done.
Was this around the same time as when you lost the baby as well? Was this around that time frame? Okay.
Yeah. Well, gotcha. It was a little bit before. Sorry,
yeah.
probably 8 months or so before.
Okay.
So I was like, I'm done. But this is, I spent a year losing weight for you. You promised me, and I was broken. I was like, man, I was devastated, and I felt worthless. Like if I could have ever explained it, would be worthless. Just not good enough because I couldn't live up to that standard that they portray.
Yeah.
So I went in my room and I was yelling. I'm like, I'm done. And he's a huge guy. I was 108 pounds because I lost so much weight. I'm not even 5'1". I'm 5'3". And I was in the room and I was like, I'm done. He wouldn't let me leave. He's like, you're not leaving. I'm like, yes, I am. He wouldn't let me leave. He was blocking the door, and I was throwing my clothes on the bed. I had a plastic coat hanger in my hand, and I hit him across the face with it. And it wasn't a cut; it was a scratch. Well, that flew some rage. Do you want me to go in depth with the fight?
Go ahead.
Okay.
We're raw and real here.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
Talk, so,
and it's interesting how our minds block out stuff. And I think it was about 2 years ago, I was actually looking for some paperwork, and I saw the police report. And I was like, and it brought back a lot of trauma that I had, the Lord had to truly heal me from. But that triggered him, and he threw me across the room. My left hip, I hit the bedpost. It was like this ball that came up. I broke the bedpost off, and I got up and was still yelling. I'm like, I'm leaving, and I was mad. I was like, I hate you, which is not okay. But he ended up, and I forgot that he choked me. And in the police report, I said, he had his hands around me, and I told him I can't breathe. I was like, I can't breathe. He's like, I don't care. So then he ended up walking to the other room, and I was packing. He's like, you're not going. We'll talk about this after work. So I had just taken apart Asher's crib, and we put him in like a big boy little toddler bed. I had the crib leaning up against the wall, and, we were yelling. He grabbed me and threw me across the room. I hit the crib, got up still, and I was just like, I'm leaving. And he finally left for work. He was on swing, so he left, and I was like shaking. I was limping because that bedpost, I hit my hip on it pretty bad. So I called the cops, not knowing I would be arrested. I've never had a speeding ticket. I've never had a pink slip in school. I don't want to get in trouble. I want to be good. There was never any reason to disobey the law or, and I like to be good, I guess. I don't know what the word, probably fear of man too, because I was like, I have to be perfect, right? So I called the cops, and he came. The windows shattered. David threw our family picture. The window was shattered. Our house was destroyed. The door got kicked off the hinges. And he came, and he's like, what happened? So I told him, and he's like, you need to circle this page where you're hurt. So I circled my hip. I circled wherever I was hurting. I think I was scratched up on one of my arms too, if I remember right. And so they're like, where's he? I said, he's on his way to work. So they called him, made him come to the police station. He had that scratch on his cheek. And we had a few physical fights over the years. Most of the time it was because he wouldn't let me leave the house. In fact, and I don't know that I've ever told anyone but John, Asher was in a car seat when he was really little. I mean, he was little. David was screaming and yelling, and I would get scared. I'd shut down. I just wanted to leave. You know, I just wanted to be out of there. I don't want to be around yelling. His gun was sitting on the counter. I picked it up and aimed it at him, and I was like, "You're going to let me leave?" He's like, "Shoot me."
Wow.
And I put the gun down. I was like, "I'm not doing that." So I just sat beside Asher. I had the keys in my hand. I just sat. And there were many times I would hide. He'd be in the house yelling and breaking stuff from drinking, and I didn't know that he drank, really. I didn't know that it was a thing till we were married like 3 years. And I would go, and mostly Asher, you know, it happened some with Brody too, but I would go and lock ourselves in the room. I would crawl in the crib with Asher and just hold him and just wait for David to get done screaming and yelling and breaking stuff. And then sometimes I would grab the keys and hide them so he couldn't take them, and he couldn't drive off and wreck our vehicle, because he would drive off and speed off. And I would go grab Asher, hop the back fence and leave and just be gone.
Wow.
Yeah, many times. But so the cop was there, and he's like, "Where's he?" They called him, and he's like, "Well, you're under arrest for domestic violence." I was like, "What?" I said, "No, I don't want to press charges or anything." He said, "It's Colorado." He said, "It's you against the state." He said, "You're both under arrest." I was like, "Okay." And he was so kind. I mean, I was compliant. I'm not going to do anything. And he said, I would suggest getting a clean pair of underwear. You're going to be there all night. I was like, "Yes, sir." He's like, "Shove them in your pockets." So yes, sir. And I did. And I said, "Sir, I promise I won't run." I said, "Is there any way I could just walk to the police car?" I said, "I promise I won't run." He said, "I'll let you walk out there, but I have to put cuffs on you before I could get you in the car." I said, "Okay." My aunt happened to show up, and I'm really close to my aunt. And I mean, I went to her beauty school. I was working at her shop.
Yeah.
She's like, "I don't know why, but the Lord told me to come here." And I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Hey," and he's like, "Yeah, you know." And I said, "Dina, I'm getting arrested." And my grandma had Asher. I said, "All I care about is Asher." I said, "Please just take care of Asher. He's never spent the night away. He was 2.5. I said, "Just keep Asher, make sure he's okay." She said, "He'll be okay, baby. We've got him." So they took me to jail, and I get there, and the lady was so mean. She's like, "What's in your pocket?" He's like, "She's being nice." He said, "She's being compliant." And she's like, "Oh, okay, what's in your pocket?" And started being nice after she realized I wasn't mean. And I was like, "Underwear." So she's like, "Okay, I'll let you keep those." They put me in the jumpsuit, and I see David, and he was standing there looking out of the jail cell with his arms crossed. And he had a past. He'd been in jail before from meth. To him, jail was no big deal. And, you know, years later, he joked. He's like, "That was my jail face." That was the scariest night, one of the scariest nights of my life. So obviously, like I said, I've never been in trouble before, and then I'm just in jail. But they took me to a holding cell, and there were a couple women in there that were in there just for a short time. And of course, they're like, "What are you in here for?" I'm like, "I hit my husband in the face with a coat hanger." You know what I mean? I'm like, what else do you say?
Yeah.
So they take off. I'm by myself. All I care about is Asher at that point. He's little. I was like, do I get a phone call? You know, you hear, I want to get a phone call. Nothing. And all night long, worship has always been such a huge part of my life, singing and worshiping. And I know that worship drives away darkness. I was laying there on this hard mat, shivering, just so cold, but then I was sweating profusely because I was so nervous, but I was shivering, and I'd see, and it was demons. I know it was demons. I mean, just black come down at me, and I'd start singing. I'd just be, "I love you, Lord," and then just, they'd go away, and I'm like, so I keep singing, and I'd stop for a minute, and I'm like, "Oh God," you know, just the whole night, and then I'd see him again, and I'd start singing again, and they'd go away. So you know, that's always been such a huge, like, I know what worship does, right? So finally the next morning, like 6 a.m, they're like, they came, they're like, "You good?" I'm like, "Yeah, can I please call him? I just need to call him. I make sure my son's okay." So they wheel this phone in there, and I called, and my whole family was over at my grandma's waiting. Because, I mean, they hadn't heard. They didn't know what was going on. My dad was already calling a bail bondsman, you know, trying to figure it out. And they're like, "Asher's okay, baby." My mom had stayed the night with my grandma and had Asher. So I was like, okay. So they did take me up to, I forgot what they call it, when they're with all the other people, and I see people. I was teaching at a beauty school then, like a college. I see one of my students in there. I'm like, "Oh my gosh." She's like, "Miss Shayla?" I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "What are you in there for?" I'm like, "Well, I hit my husband in the face with a coat hanger." And they're like, "What?" And so it was terrible. So I'm sitting there, and this one lady, they put me in there, and she's like, "Do you want to take a shower?" I'm like, "Yes." Because I was sweaty and just scared. And I'm like, "Sure." And she's like, "I have soap if you want to use it." I'm like, "Thank you." You know, I was crying in the shower, and then I get out, and this one lady's like, "Are you good?" And I'm like, "Does anyone have a Bible?" And they're like, "Yeah, here's one." And I just start reading, and I'm like, "Oh, Jesus." Like, I didn't even know. I just knew, I just wanted to read, I wanted to pray and read. So I'm like in this corner reading the Bible. And they're like, "All right, Shayla, you're coming out. You have to go to court." So I walk in court with shackles on my hands and shackles on my feet.
Wow.
And I was so scared, and I didn't know what to do. I see my parents. I see David's, I think his mom was there. I think it was just his mom. I see my aunt, my grandma, my parents. And I'm just so scared. No, my grandma wasn't there. She had Asher, sorry. And they're like, you 2 years probation, you can sign this and agree to this. And I was like, I didn't know. I mean, I never knew what to do. I was like, okay. So we signed. And then this public attorney calls. Anyway, it was a whole fiasco. We got our gun rights taken away. We both hunted. Got everything taken away. It was a year-long fight to get those back. And one of the things, it was interesting, is they ended up changing the charges on us. They both had originally charged us with third-degree assault as an act of domestic violence. They actually kept that on me, but they worked it around, and they changed something. It's weird because of his size. Like my attorney was going to fight and say his size, because he was like 260 something pounds, and they were going to try to fight like self-defense, all this stuff. But in my heart, I was just like, I want to stay married. I don't want this, So they had given us 2 years probation, and they're like, no communication. And I was like, Your Honor, we have a son. I'm not sure how that'll work. We saw bills together. I want to stay married. And she's like, okay, well, you can choose a family member to use for communication. So I was like, my aunt. So we used her, and we ended up sneaking and seeing each other, because how do you stay married to someone and not talk about the kid and the bills and the everything? Anyway,
were you guys still living together too?
We couldn't. So he ended up staying at his mom's for, I think it was about 6 months. They had an apartment, and he stayed there. I stayed at the house, and I had Asher for the most part, but then he would get him when he was off. And at that point, he really started going to church, and he was going to it. We would alternate. We had a pastor. I was still on the worship team. So Pastor Jeff would be like, all right, so David will come this week. You go next. Because he knew we couldn't be together. And he was like, trying to help us. And that's the church we were really involved in. And anyway, both on probation. I think it was about a year. And but 6 months of we couldn't be together. That happened. I'm sorry, it was 2 months. They shortened it. I went because I just wanted to be together for Christmas. So I went before the judge. I wrote this long thing, and I said, please, I've never been in trouble. He's wanting to do better. And she's like, I will grant it, but you're going to be around family. You can't be separate, or you can't be together. So we're like, okay. And there was a lot of, rules and regs, but we did what we were supposed to. So that was in between Asher and Brody.
And just to clarify really quick for those watching, you guys, even through all of that, you guys still wanted to be married. Mm-hmm. You still wanted to be together. Divorce was like off the table, like in your mind, because you know that divorce is wrong. God doesn't want divorce. You're Absolutely. Like, I'm not doing that. Mm-mm. Correct. So throughout this whole process, you're wanting to reconcile.
100%. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I didn't want to be divorced. I mean, my heart was to stay married, to do ministry, to raise our son, because we just had Asher, and I never thought about divorce. But then it got progressively worse. He started, like I said earlier, the pain pills. He started doing those often. And really it was enough to where he was almost non-coherent. Wow. And I mean, I would wake up in the middle of the night and he'd be passed out on the chair, like upside down. And I was just like, but I was still serving the Lord. I was still going to the worship, on the worship team, and he was working at a coal mine. So he'd go to church when he could. So that was that. So then we had Bro, and in 2000, I'll go back. So I was doing hair still, but 2017, my mom has a franchise, and I would go around to I was sick of doing hair. I always loved people, but I was just like over hair. And I started doing what she did. So we'd go to different franchises. And over the years, I knew John. We had bought a car or two from him, and he was always, the nice guy. And we would go to franchises and fix interior vehicles, cigarette burns or drilled holes, leather. I loved it. It was the funnest job. And I started going to his dealership quite often. Men have always scared me. My dad is a wonderful man. He's so kind, but he was grumpy. He's a good man. He worked all night, and really just realizing the environment, I realize now why he was so grumpy. But I was still scared of men. And then after what happened with David, I walked on eggshells all the time. I knew how not to trigger him. I knew, if I kept Asher out of the way, if I did this, I could keep him from getting angry and keep him from getting triggered. So I just knew that's how it worked. But I started, working a lot at the dealerships. If I'd go to John's lot, I could just be like, hey, and I walk his lot and be like, you have an F-150 out there with a drilled hole. And he'd be like, you don't have to ask. I trust you. I know you're going to up my value of the vehicles. Just fix them. If they have over, 100,000 miles, ask me. But he's like, just do it. I trust you. And the other dealerships, they'd be like, well, I don't really know. So there was wheeling and dealing, and that's not who I am. I don't have a salesman personality. My mom would be like, come on, that car needs fixed. Where I'd be like, okay. It made me nervous. I didn't like that. So I would go to John's lot. And then Kazie's, the bigger lot that he had talked about working at. And they would, same thing there. They just be like, you know your way, just fix it and bill us. So I started hanging out at John's more because he was the only man I was around that I felt safe around. So that was 2017. I was still doing that, still dealing with all this stuff with David. He started to drink pretty bad. There was a lot of arguments, a lot of me trying to leave. And over the years, I had printed off divorce papers many times, multiple times. And then I would be threatened that he'd kill himself if I left or he'd destroy everything we had. So I was like, I can't do that. And so I just kept pressing. Well, 2019, I started going to Bible school. I actually started going to GCU, to Grand Canyon University, to be I wanted to be a counselor. I wanted to get in people's heads and figure out what made them tick. And I ended up quitting that because I was like, this isn't it. There's something more. Now I know it's, they need delivered.
Yeah.
But I was like, I don't understand. There's something. So then I started going to school to be a pastor because the Assemblies of God, they want you, a woman they can have their pastoral, I don't remember how it worked, but I was going to do that, but have my pastoral certificate in counseling too. So I started doing that. And he was at that point driving truck. So he'd be gone for, a week or 2 weeks and drinking a ton on the road, just hammered. And I was like, no, I'm going to do this. I would get up every morning and pace in our shed and pace and pray and, pray in tongues. And I'm like, I declare freedom over my husband. And I just would pray. And I was like, Lord, I know this, he's got to get set free from this. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep being so scared all the time. So I'll say, 2019, it was weird. And I'm going to talk about that. But I had a dream. I'm a dreamer big time. I dream almost every night. This one was very vivid. I started to visit John more at the dealership, and he truly was just a good friend. I kind of looked at him. I would talk to him and visit, but it was that safety. And he was just a friend, There was a set of stairs in my dream, and about halfway up the stairs, John was there. And he hugged me, and I woke up, and I was like, well, that's weird. And I remember telling my mom, she's like, you can't dream like that. I'm like, I can't control my dreams,
Yeah.
So,
and it was weird because you guys were both married at the time.
Yeah.
So that's why it was weird.
Yeah. And both, he didn't know, I didn't know, both in very unhappy marriages. I was trying everything I could to serve the Lord and just kept thinking if I could stick it out. I didn't realize that he was going through what he was going through at the same time. And we were both going through that. Anyway, 2019, I was like, I can't do this anymore. And 2020. We went to Mexico with one of my really good friends. And that was August. He was drunk the whole time. Really enough to where he was basically in the motel room, and we were hanging out. We went fishing. We went and rode the banana boat, all kinds of stuff. All the way home from that trip, I was like, I'm done. I just can't. I can't do this anymore. We got home. I printed off divorce papers. So from August through October, I had to get a plan. And I kept telling my mom, there's a plan. Because I didn't want hurt. I didn't think he would necessarily hurt Asher at the time. Now I know different. But I was scared that if he throws something and Asher was in the way, or Brody was in the way, or whoever, and Brody was pretty little. I thought that's where I was scared, but I ended up finally October 17th, I think, of 2020. I had the papers printed, and he was like, I'm going to go run to the gas station and get chew. I knew he was going to get alcohol. because he would get those shooters and drink them on the way home. I had divorce papers, and I said, I just need to talk to you. And I had a video camera set up because I wanted evidence in case he hurt me or hurt the. And I said, I'm done. And he's like, what? This is a joke. And it was horrible. I mean, enough to where, it was, I couldn't tolerate it. I was scared to death. I went to my parents. At one point at my parents' house, I was sitting on my dad's tailgate with a 357 because David was threatening to come take the boys, but he was drunk. And I was like, I'll shoot him before he takes the boys and drives drunk. So my dad was gone. He worked nights, and that's where I stayed for 3 weeks before I got an apartment. And I was sitting on there with a 357, and I was like, if he comes up this driveway, I don't care. I'll protect my boys.
Yeah.
And anyway, about literally 2 days before I left David, I had gone to John's dealership, and I was just checking for work. I would walk the lot usually, and I'd be like, yeah, you have this. And he wasn't there. He had just pulled up, and he's like, how are you? And I just broke down. I started crying. I was like, I think I'm going to leave David. And he's like, I'm sorry, and he gave me a hug, and that was it. Well, 2 days later, I left, and I was gone. It was a rough time. I left October. David, when he wasn't drinking, he'd be civil. And we'd be like, let's try to, I was done.
Yeah.
But I'd be like, let's try to work this out where you can have the boys, weekends, whatever. When you're off the truck, just let me know and you can keep them those couple days. And I was trying to be civil. I wanted to be nice. I never wanted ugly. So December, he said he needed to leave and go to a rehab. And he said, I want to sell the house. Are you okay? I said, absolutely. I wanted to do whatever to get help. So he went to a rehab. He was gone from December of 20 to September of 21. And in that time, that was a year that I kept telling the Lord, I'll come back. I dropped off the worship team. When I left David, I told my friend Lucy, that was a worship leader, I said, I need to step. And she's like, I know, you need to not be up here. You're going through stuff. I said, yeah. In that year, I was mad at God, and I kept saying, Lord, I'll come back, but I'm mad at you right now. I said, I prayed for 13 years and you didn't do anything.
Wow.
13 years, God. And you told me, I've lived for you my whole life. I did everything right. I did it the right way that I was supposed to. And what do I have? So I started talking to John more, and really we shouldn't have talked the way we were talking. I mean, he was with his now ex still, and it was unhappy. He was drinking. I started drinking when my boys didn't know it. I would hide it. And Asher actually at one point saw my bottle of wine, and he started bawling. He's like, you're going to be like my dad. I said, I'll never be like your dad. And David was gone, and so in their mind, it was almost like a death to them because they couldn't talk to him for several months. He was just gone. And so John and I, talked more. And David actually in September, and I had all kinds of people trying to hook me up with people. And I'm like, no, I was good. And I already had feelings for John because I knew his kindness. I knew the safety in him. Mm-hmm. And it was wrong. I mean, I know that, but I knew I was safe. And so, in that time I was like, God, I'll come back. I'm just mad. But in September of 21, David called and he wanted to talk to the boys. And I said, they're not here. And he's like, well, I want to talk to you. And I'm like, okay. He said, I'm going to stay here for 5 years. Have you come back and be with me in Texas? And I'm like, no, I'm done. You broke me. I said, there's no. Yeah. So he quit that rehab in 2 weeks, came back, and it was bad, that lots of drinking. I actually had to file a restraining order because he threatened to kill me. Wow. That restraining order is still in effect. Mm-hmm. There's some civil talking, and it's only regarding the boys. No other, and I slept with a gun by my bed all night. That night I ended up filing the next day because he threatened. It was after, and that was after John's divorce.
And you and John are together at this time.
We're together at this point, and John was already divorced. And he and I had kind of officially started dating, and he had been divorced this was December. Him and his wife had split up in August, and then they were done. And so December we kind of started hanging out more. And he's like, well, who are you dating? And I said, well, John Hager. And he was livid. And that's when he threatened to kill me, and I slept with a gun all night long. And it was a really rough few years. But
you and John coming together as well, I want to highlight, was rough in general.
Yeah.
Because not only was there issues with your ex, but also your family as well, correct?
Yes.
So it was a very big deal for you and John coming together.
100%.
Yeah.
So, and I'm glad so John is 27 years older than me. And when we first started, kind of getting serious, I was like, I've known you a long time. I said, I don't want to keep putting my heart out if this isn't going to be a thing. And he said, well, baby, I'm old. And he was 60 at that point. And I said, and I'm not going to tear up. I've practiced this. I'm not going to tear up, but,
it's okay.
Yeah,
I've
I know.
tried many times.
I know. I'm like, don't do it. But I said, if I have 5 years with you or 10 years or 30 with you, it's worth it for how you treat me. I said, that's worth it. I don't care. So then at that point, he's like, okay, so my mom kept trying, and she was mad. She found out, and I was in the middle of cutting her hair in her kitchen. I was cutting her hair, and she said, I have a question. And I said, what? And she's like, why doesn't John change his Facebook profile to single instead of married still when he's not married? And I said, because he doesn't want women messaging him. And she's like, well, it's not like he's that attractive. And I said, I don't care what you think, Mom. And she's like, you know what? This is so embarrassing. He is old. He's my age. And I said, I don't care. I said, he's good to me and he loves my boys. I said, I don't care. And she said, your dad and I feel like failures for how you turned out.
Wow.
And I was like, I don't really think I'm that bad of a person, but okay. I don't think I finished cutting her hair. I can't remember. I think I just walked out, and my dad came in. He's like, what's going on? I said, your wife. And I left. And really, it's still an issue, and it makes me sad. She'll be civil. And, she's seen us, and she'll be civil, but it's still, she can't stand it.
Yeah. Praying for reconciliation.
100%. And we'll talk, and I'll be civil, but it's, and I know what the Lord can do. And when John was actually in Colorado last week, Asher was sick, and they were in Colorado. Asher wanted my mom and John to lay hands on him.
Wow.
So John went to my mom's house in the middle of her kitchen, and John and my mom prayed for Asher. So that was a huge step.
Praise
and
the Lord.
Yeah. So I know what the Lord can do, but I've struggled with that, and so much guilt. And truly, because this is a big platform and I want to publicly, I apologize for truly hurting, and for how John and I came together in our brokenness, and anyone we hurt in the process. I think we forget when broken people hurt people hurt people. I think that's a saying. And we were so broken in other ways from our previous lives and just stuff and what we were already walking through, that two broken people came together. But all that. So I started, he brought that up in the testimony. I started, I knew I was called to more. I've watched deliverance videos. I always wanted to do it. I studied Jezebel. I studied all this stuff. And I'm like, I'm called to so much more. I want to do this. I want to cast demons out. And I happened to see one of Apostle's videos when we were still in Colorado. I'm like, that guy's casting a Jezebel out. And I'm like, check this out. And he was still like, yeah, pretty like, okay. So I started watching, and we moved to Florida. I had no clue Apostle lived here. That's what's funny. We were at his brother's house, and I'm like, he's going to be in Bush now. And so he's like, yeah, we'll go. And if you watch his testimony, you'll see, his side of it. But my side was like, this is going to be so cool. I was so excited. I'm like, I want to see demons getting cast out, So that night after we left, John's like, I just feel so free. I'm like, this is so cool. And when John was on the ground, I already spoke in tongues. I was raised in church. I just never got to see the supernatural part of it. I saw people slay in the spirit a lot. I saw interpretation of tongues. I knew the Lord's presence. I saw, and it's not that they were against it. It just didn't happen. So as these demons are manifesting, like, this is so cool, well, then John goes down. And I don't remember the forerunner's name that was praying for him. I put my hand on his foot, and I was just like, come on. And I'm praying in tongues. So we leave, and I'm like, this is what we've got to be forerunners. This is what I want to do. Well, he didn't know that I signed up, and I'm like, I really want to do this. He's like, well, let's think about it. I'm like, Well, you can think about it all you want. Yeah. And I'm like, he can think about it all he wants, but you know what? I'm like, I'm still signing up. And obviously I should have talked to him. I know he's the man of the house, right? But I was like, no, and I thought, and so I told him, well, even if we don't like do this whole thing, I can still learn. And I still want to do this. I still, so I was already watching the videos and I'm like, I already signed up, buddy. You can, you can get ready when you're ready, And then I hadn't watched as many, I hadn't like fully committed till he was like, I'm done, and then we're like, we're going to watch these videos. I want to do this. And we had been going to Bushnell and seeing all kinds of stuff. But, in all of that, just the Lord's faithfulness.
Amen.
All the stuff.
So
and yeah, I mean, it's truly incredible. And I carried that for so long. And actually before the women's conference, all the leadership, we were washing each other's feet. And Marianne Hastings, Roxanne was like, I want you guys to prophesy over each other while you're washing each other's feet.
Wow.
And Marianne she was washing my feet and she said, Shayla, the Lord is pleased with your union, with you and John's union. And I just broke because I was like, thank you, Lord. Because just all this, like, just how it came about. I'm like,
Well, you were told by your family, by your parents, that you were a failure because of that.
Yeah.
So that was the Lord healing you in that moment.
So much. And then it's funny because at so many different times when Natalie saw us in Bushnell, and this was truly maybe in like 2 months after we moved to Florida, Natalie came and she's like, have you all ever been told you're pastors? And we're like, no. And I'm like, I wanted to marry a pastor. And John's like, I was always told I couldn't be. And then I can't remember, Malaya, when she certified us, she's like, you all are co-pastors. I see it. And then twice Apostle was like, I think you guys are pastors. Wow. So it's just funny how, truly how the Lord works and how he can take, two broken people and truly just heal and restore. And now we get to, my heart, and I know John's heart, is just to see those people who felt worthless their whole life and in marriages. I wrote a marriage curriculum and it's getting edited.
Come on, I didn't know this. All right.
Yeah, all right. And, we want to help marriages before they come to the place of divorce, right? Because I know how sacred that is. But the broken, people who truly were raised in broken homes, and just to truly walk them through realizing how valued they are, but through that, being set free and seeing just what the Lord can do. And in that, and what a gift to be able to walk through that with my husband and the things that we were, set free from and see our family. Asher, our older son, is 16 now. And for a year, this last year, he wanted to live in Colorado with his dad. And every day I kept saying, my prodigal will come home. And he was running. And now that kid is home and he is with us. And the other day he told me, Mom, I just want to do whatever it is the Lord has called me to. I want to be the man that God's called me to be.
Come on. Remember I told you
you told me.
I told you. I knew it.
Yep.
Come on. Praise God. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So. I got Holy Ghost goosebumps all over. Praise God. This is such a powerful testimony. It's so beautiful that even now it's like God has answered the desires of your heart. For those of you who do not know, John and Shayla are in our pastors and training program. They are amazing, amazing, just such a strong pastoral couple in this ministry. And I know that the Supernatural Life has changed both of your guys' lives in such a huge way. Just to close this out, Pastor Shayla, God, what would you want to tell somebody watching this who maybe they've gone through divorce, or maybe they've been in abusive relationships, or they've gone through the stuff with the addiction, or, maybe they're wanting to become a forerunner. They've been thinking about this, or deliverance. What's something that you would want to leave the viewers with?
You were born with a place in your heart that only the Lord can fill. And it doesn't matter how far you've gone. It doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter how unworthy the world has made you feel. The Lord loves you so much, and he is right there. And that's what I kept telling God. I'll come back. And he told me, all you have to do is turn around. And I did, and he was right there. It doesn't matter. And if you've never known him, I promise you that only he can take that pain and give you the joy, his joy. And truly this ministry, like I said, I was raised in church, but when I do deliverances, I always tell people from, 4 years old to 36 years old, this was my relationship with God. But from joining the supernatural life, it was 36 to 38. It's like God took a slingshot and just shot us out. The revelation, the wisdom, the growth, and truly understanding, walking in our gifts. That's what's amazing about this ministry is everyone is prophetic enough, an apostle, and I mean, you've seen it. They see stuff in you and say, the Lord has this call on your life, and you might not even know it, but they take that and they grow that and they cultivate it, and they'll send you out. I mean, it's about training and equipping. And if you're looking for a ministry that trains and equips, this is it. And you will get sent out, and you will walk in your call and truly see the captive set free. You'll see miracles and signs and wonders. So hands down, join this ministry. It will change your life in every way. And I could never look back. I mean, I just can't wait to see what else the Lord has and how he's growing this ministry and bringing people to him.
Come on. Amen. Well, you guys heard it from Shayla herself. Become a forerunner. Go to www.thesupernaturallife.org. Get involved with this ministry. Get discipled. Get the teaching, the training, the schools. Just do it. What are you waiting for? Do it. Go down right now. And if you do, comment down below so that way I can be the first to welcome you into the Forerunner family. Also, again, make sure you guys become a member of the podcast channel. All right. Make sure you guys check that out because we have some behind the scenes coming that are awesome. You want to be there. You want to watch that. Become a Forerunner. Like, share, subscribe. Y'all know what to do. So go down in the comment section. Let us know if this testimony touched your heart and if you guys have had similar experiences or if there was something that you took away from this. This has been episode 23 of That Supernatural Talk podcast. We'll see you next week for a very special episode 24. God bless you guys. See you soon. Bye.